It is the 5th of April 2026, and this presentation is entitled Unlike Any Other, the Persian Conflict Factor, presented by the Humble Servant. This is the second installment to this series. Well, it wasn't intended to be a series, but as things change, we put information out that reflects the current paradigm that is affecting global society. So this is the presentation, unlike any other, the Persian conflict factor, following up from the first presentation, unlike any other. So peace to the house of Jacob and to the strangers that have joined themselves to the household of Israel. I hope that Yahuwah gives you the wisdom to discern his will and what is currently happening on the global stage at this very moment. So all praises to the Most High Yah, Yahuwah, and this presentation continues. So this presentation is going to look at a review of Unlike Any Other, which was done a couple of years ago, and then we'll look into some historical analysis as it relates to Iran and how things led to this moment. We'll look at some of the current conditions, what's going to be happening next, and then we're going to then present conclusion and final thoughts. And this presentation has been, well, it started off just around the time the conflict in the so-called Middle East began, but when it's time to present, it's time to present. And Most High Yah is, I hope, gives everyone the insight to see what is taking place and to act accordingly. So first, we're going to do the review, unlike any other, which was presented back on the 28th of February, 2024. And it's interesting that the conflict kicked off on the 28th of February, 2026. Very interesting. Okay, so at the time that presentation was done, it was precipitated because of the Israel-Hamas conflict that kicked off October 7, 2023, when Hamas did an incursion into Israel, and they had a festival taking place. I think it was that festival was for Sukkot of that year. It took place, and they did an incursion, and everything went south after that for both Israel and Gaza. That presentation looked at how the ethnic, religion, and social divisions from that conflict can escalate beyond the region. So some thoughts was put into that, how those factors could make things explode even further or escalate even further. I also looked at how that could lead to forced and voluntary migrations of people, and how the amalgamation of all the peoples is creating friction within societies, different ethnic groups, each ethnic group sticking to themselves. How everyone would look at each other from different perspectives, would have somewhat of distrust among the different groups. So it tried to explore, it explored some of those factors as well. Also, how minorities were treated in the US and Canada during World War II. So it focused on mainly the Japanese who were put into concentration camps in the US and in Canada as well as a result of World War II, and how that conflict, with Japan being one of the antagonists against the Western Alliance, how anyone who had a Japanese ethnic background, both in the US and Canada, were impacted by that war, and how it could also impact anyone in this current conflict. What can be expected from a society with a mixed population. We also looked at persons along with some historical facts that how they were infected based on their ethnic background and their status in society. And then we looked at the complex logistics of fighting wars in different theaters. So you're fighting a war overseas, and then you have social problems at home, and how those circumstances could impact how the conflict evolves, especially when your society is divided and at the same time you're trying to expedite an external conflict beyond the shores of your borders. So those things we looked at how those things can impact any kind of conflict where the US is executing a war. It was assumed that the aftermath of the October 7th incident, along with the ongoing conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and also included the economic situation in the US, would have catapulted the world into World War III. So at the time, those were some of the thoughts that were presented that would have escalated things beyond what it currently was after that October 7th incident and alongside the situation with Ukraine. Also, not forgetting the effects of the COVID-19 changing the social dynamic of communities with the willingness of persons to snitch or to call the authorities on their neighbor is still impacting engagement with people. So those factors at the time were still raw with a lot of persons, the conflict within Ukraine, coming out of COVID-19, where a lot of people were very mistrusting and misgiving of their neighbors whom they knew for a very long time. And a lot of tattling took place where people called the authorities to see what their neighbors were potentially doing or even not doing. And those circumstances still have an impact on the society then and even up to this moment. So devolving into a global war was not the case, but with a fractured society, any situation can precipitate unrest and conflict as the evils of this world is coming to light with no justice for victims. So we looked at the Epstein situation. That's also a factor in what's currently taking place. And in the last presentation that was done, the evil acts of man, some of those factors were discussed as to how it has impacted society where no justice for the victims was ever pursued. And well, we'll get into some of that as we get into the presentation further, because there have been so many developments that has changed within the last maybe 48 hours of this presentation being done. So a lot of things, this whole situation is moving so fast, and a lot of the factors that led up to the situation was discussed in the last presentation and is still a factor even in this presentation as the information is discussed. Now the supersonic arrows are flying for a second time in months with the second go around. And we know before last year in 2025 there was a dust up with Israel and Iran. And the USA is in quotes balls deep alongside the Jewish state of Israel. So last year it was mainly, well, the US provided some logistical support to the state of Israel, but this time around the USA is deeply entrenched with the state of Israel in the current conflict. In all honesty, the expectations was to have NATO, along with the US, facing down Russia and China as the expanding UK conflict, as the conflict, the Ukraine conflict expand outside of the confines of the armed dispute. So initially with the Ukraine conflict going, the assumption that that would have, along with the October 7th incident, would have really pushed things to high escalation globally, but it didn't happen. Russia did a good job of keeping the conflict localized, taking many losses with asset wise, but still managing to take ground in the Ukraine conflict incrementally. So Russia was attacked many times by the Western alliance that is backing the Ukraine, and they did not take the bait to escalate the conflict any further because Russia knew that anything more would cause a problem locally within their geographic borders. So they took the hits and they incrementally pushed into Ukraine to neutralize the threat that was coming from the Ukraine. The Russia Ukraine conflict is just the appetizer. Now the main course is being served and it is very bitter to swallow. How did we arrive at this moment? So now we're going to look at some historical analysis that is leading to this current moment that has engulfed the entire globe. So starting with World War II is where this analysis begins. Iran has found themselves in the crosshairs of the British and Soviets because of their, in quotes, neutral support for Germany. So back in World War II, Germany was one of the antagonists along with Italy and Japan. They had their axis, and then the Western Alliance had their axis. For the British Soviet alliance, it was imperative and strategic to control Iran and any vital supply routes and other infrastructure that crisscrosses that entire area. So from the map, you see that Iran, and to the north was the Soviet Union at the time. So all like Turkmenistan would have been engulfed in the Soviet Union, and then to the east of that would have been the old Ottoman Empire that was dismantling as a result of World War II, because the Turks also gave their support to the Germans in that conflict. And this is such a turnaround from the prior conflict of the Crimean War, where the Turks or the Ottomans were aligned with the Western powers to take on Russia at that time. So a lot of flip-flopping took place, leading up to World War II, with all of the different alliances that readjusted itself going into World War II. So Iran was in the middle of that situation in World War II, and they were sympathetic towards Germany. And that's a source that once this is published, you can take a look and get some more insights into that Soviet Anglo invasion of Iran in 1941. So Reza Shah Pahlavi assumed total power over Iran after the deposing of the Ahmed Shah. That was in a 1921 coup. Then the ruler who was weak and the last in succession of the Qajar monarchs. Reza Shah Pahlavi was installed the Minister of War and eventually consolidated power by 1925 and assumed the title of Shah. He was assisted by the British and Russians before the incarnation of the Soviets. So back in 1925, Shah Pahlavi, along with others within Iran, staged a coup, got some support from the British and the Russian at the time, and he eventually consolidated power. He was the Minister of War, and he eventually consolidated power and took over and became the Shah. When the Anglo-Soviet invasion met its objective, Reza Shah Pahlavi abdicated. So now the British and the Soviets for World War II needed Reza Shah Pahlavi out of the way. So he abdicated, and his son Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was installed as the new Shah. The occupation lasted until 1946, and here's where Iran's modern instability began. So once Mohammad Reza Pahlavi took over from his father, the British and the Soviets remained in Iran up until 1946, and then everything began to spiral from that point up to this moment. And the source is also there that you can look into to get more details. Mohammad Mossadegh became prime minister under Mohammad Reza Pahlavi post World War II. During his tenure, the relationship between himself and the Shah was tenuous, and Mossadegh's policy of nationalizing oil resources angered the West, and this was namely the United States and Britain. The Shah was briefly deposed, and with the assistance of the United States and Britain, was reinstated and Mossadegh ousted in a counter coup. With the reinstatement of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, he had absolute control within with the backing of the Western Alliance. The Shah control was considered oppressive, which led to his eventual downfall. So that's Mohammad Mossadegh. He was a very popular prime minister when he came to power within Iran. And like many progressive prime minister, and I use the word progressive because we saw with the evil acts of man, we saw like people like Maurice Bishop, Prudence Malumba, Thomas Sankara, how these men, when they tried to flip the script and really push things forward within their nations, the Western powers did not take kindly to it, so they were deposed. So this has been going on for a very long time, and Mohammad Mossadegh was victim of that whole situation as well. So he was deposed, and the Shah had total control over Iran from that point forward. During the reign of Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, Israeli intelligence, and that's the Mossad, had unfettered influence within the security apparatus of Iran. This believed to be stated by Moshe Dayan. There was an interview, unfortunately I cannot find it anymore, where he spoke about how much influence the Israeli spy apparatus had within Iran for a very long time. They were the eyes and the ears of the Shah, along with the British and US intelligence. They turned a blind eye to the oppressions of for the sake of the oil. The Shah also used the secret police, the Savak, to repress the people and maintain his tight control. His callousness towards his own people sowed the seeds for the Islamic Revolution that eventually overthrew him. Now, there's an argument about a lot of the exiles. They're called Pavlis. They talk about how oppressive the Islamic regime was, but what we need to keep in mind is that they had control. A lot of these exiles who are now in exile had control with the Shah, and because of that state police called the Savak, they caused a lot of repressions in Iran. So it's a matter of the tables turning, and they are pissed off. Unfortunately, when one party is oppressed and another one takes over, people want to get their get back. And it's unfortunate that at the end of the day, nobody really thought about doing what was right. But that's a very complex matter. But the point is, those who are now in the exile of the Iranian diaspora, unfortunately, many of them had positions of authority under the Shah, and the Savak did a lot of damage to the society, hence the resistance to the current, the prince who wants to come back into Iran. There's a lot of animosity still taking place, but the point is the Mossad had a lot of influence within the Iranian state under the Shah. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini was the Baba Yaga we were told to be afraid of before Osama bin Laden. During the 80s, his image was plastered across the television and print media, stirring fear. And this was one of the many things that the system did to keep people in check. Demonize somebody, keep them in the rotation of the news cycle, so that they can set the agenda for the external society and keep everybody in line and in fear and always depending on them to keep us safe and protected. His odds with the Shah began with the reforms that Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was trying to implement. These reforms were seen as anti-Islamic. Their conflict escalated when the Shah granted immunity to US military personnel who were operating in Iran and to whom the Shah owed a debt of gratitude for his grip on the throne. So here we have a situation where the US military was given unfettered powers, and this tends to happen in a lot of places. And unfortunately, that power was abused. And because of that abuse, people were upset and perturbed. So subsequently, he was exiled, but continued his activism towards the removal of the Shah externally. And he did end up in France. He bounced around. He bounced to Iraq, a couple other places, and then finally was in France for a very long time until his return to Iran. Winston Churchill, Ronald Reagan, and Margaret Thatcher are three political leaders whose policy have the world in the instability it is currently in. Churchill was at the helm of the British government for the Anglo-Soviet operation that overthrew Reza Shah Pahlavi and saw the elevation of his son Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. Then, when Mohammad Mossadegh tried to nationalize Iranian oil, Churchill saw that it did not come to fruition. With the help of US and British intelligence apparatus, Mossadegh was removed and dislike for the West was fomented even more. You can also include this in Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini dislike for the West. So Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, Churchill. These three figures have played a major role in trying to reshape global society, along with a lot of the tensions that we see happening in Iran. Unfortunately, when you have the Western power trying to exert that authority over everyone else, they don't really care who gets hurt at the end of the day. And to be quite honest, just thinking about the situation, they don't even care about their own people. It's about that, as the new term is, the Epstein class. They really cared about, and not really their people. But the people is what is used to justify everything that they claim to be doing. We're doing this for the people. We're doing this for freedom. We're doing this for safety. We're doing this for you name it. The people are the ones that is the justification why it's being done. But it was never really for the people. It's for that Epstein class of people, the 1%, the billionaires, the industrialists, that all of this has been done for. And when Mossadegh went against the system, he had to be removed. And Churchill was one of the leaders that was at the helm in two occasions, during World War II and during post World War II, when Iran wanted to nationalize their oil. He was at the helm, and nothing really comes to an end. It just continues on to the next successor within the government infrastructure. So when President Jimmy Carter was in the final days of his administration, he faced the Iran hostage crisis and looked weak and lost the election to President Reagan. Both Reagan and Thatcher wanted to dismantle the Iranian Revolution with Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini at its head. This led to clandestine operations to use drug sales to fund black operations to depose the Ayatollah. This situation was known as the Iran Contra affair. A lot of drugs were sold into the black Negro communities across the Americas, and it led to the crack epidemic. The lid was blown by the journalist Gary Webb, but the real perpetrators did not face justice. And for those who remember, Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North was the fall guy. He took the hit for Reagan, Bush Sr., and everybody else that was involved in that whole situation. Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher enabled Saddam Hussein to wage a war with Iran with the funds generated from the drug sales and other clandestine operations. And this was discussed in the last presentation, The Evil Acts of Man. So you see how these two intertwined into each other, these two presentations. The Iraq War from 1980 to 1988 had a heavy toll on the citizens of Iran and Iraq. In this war, Saddam Hussein was given chemical weapons to use on the Iranians, and he did use those chemical weapons. The war ended in a stalemate. Saddam Hussein eventually met his demise after he was removed, after being accused of having weapons of mass destruction and having nuclear ambitions, which turned out to be false. And in that small picture that is imposed next to the bigger picture of Saddam Hussein is Donald Rumsfeld. And as we know, Donald Rumsfeld was then Defense Secretary. We know the Department of Defense have been changed to the Department of War, but he was the Defense Secretary twice, and the second time was under George Bush Jr. But in that intermediate time between his tenure at the Defense Department, he was an envoy, and he was sent to he was the point man to provide support to Saddam Hussein to fight the war against Iran. And it's amazing how a lot of these bureaucrats and otherwise industrialists, because he is also an industrialist, how they cycle through the system and always are in rotation whenever you see these types of conflicts or circumstances bear its head. So Donald Rumsfeld is someone to you can look further into his actions, into a lot of things that have been taking place over the years. And again, he was part of the government when George Bush Jr. decided to roll into Iraq and depose Saddam Hussein, because again, his usefulness came to an end, so they had to get rid of him. Ayatollah Khamenei succeeded Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini and kept the Iranian society together. Him, along with the military and political establishment, have prepared for the moment their nation is now facing. Based on all the reporting on the current conflict, Iran has been strategically preparing for the possibility of war for 40 years. That's a very long time to prepare, and that preparation is bearing fruit right now. It is very interesting that Western intelligence were not aware of the extent of the preparations to stockpile all the current munitions used in the last two encounters. It is this platform's opinion that Ayatollah Khamenei knew he was being tracked and may have used it as an opportunity to clean house with some unfortunate casualties. In any revolution, you're always going to have a Judas or two in your midst. And it's just an opinion based on, he could have saved himself, but he chose not to. And now we're seeing how that situation is bearing fruit, that his martyrdom is bearing fruit for the Iranian people. Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the previous Ayatollah, is now running Iran, and they have tried to assassinate him. He escaped, and he is keeping a very low profile, but still has a lot of influence over how the Iranian military and political establishment is executing the war. So there was not really a regime change, it was a regime shift. So what the Israel-US alliance was trying to accomplish fell flat in terms of having a leadership change at the very top, even though they were successful in taking out a lot of senior leaders within the Iranian military and political establishment. So now we're going into current conditions and who is telling the truth. So Tucker Carlson stated that President Trump is being fed bad data. This statement is significant to understand the current execution of the conflict started by the United States and the State of Israel on February 28, 2026. So Tucker is alleging that based on information he's receiving, that President Trump is being fed bad intel in order to keep the war moving. But not only that, but they may also have damning Epstein related evidence being used as sort of the carrot dangling over his head to keep him executing this conflict. Tragic. No one should be held for ransom like this, where the whole world ends up catching a cold because of the indiscretions of a couple people. It is on record that the Prime Minister of Israel has been stating that certain countries have or are on the verge of developing a nuclear weapon. That is a potential threat to the state and the US and the entire world. So that means to Israel. If you go back into the archives with Benjamin Netanyahu's interviews, it's something that he has always been shouting from the rooftops. And this has been further from the truth. As we know, Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction. And we know Afghanistan was not responsible for 9/11. But say something regular, say it as often, and a lie becomes the truth. Recently, the president of the US was surrounded by religious leaders on March the 5th for their annual prayer ritual. That event, along with Tucker Carlson's statement, brought the following passage of scripture to mind. So Isaiah chapter 19, verses 1 to 3. The vision of Egypt. Behold, Yahuwah sits on a swift cloud, and shall come to Egypt, and the idols of Egypt shall be moved at his presence, and their heart shall faint within them, and the Egyptians shall be stirred up against the Egyptians, and a man shall fight against his brother, and a man against his neighbor, city against city, and law against law. And the spirit of the Egyptians shall be troubled within them, and I will frustrate their counsel. And they shall inquire of their gods and their images, and them that speak out of the earth, and them that have in them a divining spirit. So as we know in prophecy, America is considered Egypt, based on the captivity of the household of Israel, currently in Western, scattered across the 4 nations, but America is the heart of that system. And if you looked around the US, a lot of cities have Egyptian names and a lot of Egyptian monuments installed. So here we have a situation where these religious leaders have surrounded the president, claiming to give spiritual guidance, but it's far from what comes from the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This has nothing to do with him. And this passage of scripture from Isaiah perfectly fits what you're seeing here in this image, along with how the American society is currently divided. So they are not really having the true Elohim on their side. It's the false ones that is currently providing all of the false, all of the bad information that is currently feeding this war. It's not from the Most High God. It's from every other evil, well, every other non-sanctioned entity that is currently feeding into this group of people. So this is from Psalm chapter 32, verse 10 to 12 from the Septuagint, and it's a different read in the KJV. Yahuwah frustrates the counsel of the nations. He brings to naught also the reasonings of the people, and brings to naught the counsels of princes. But the counsel of Yahuwah endures forever, the thoughts of his heart from generation to generation. Blessed is the nation whose Elohim is Yahuwah, the people whom he has chosen for his own inheritance. And the Elohim of America is not the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's some other entity that currently has that influence over this nation and this group of people. Something that we should bear in mind, especially when you hear them saying that they're praying to God. No, God is just a generic word. It doesn't mean what you think it means. And they are very much well aware of that, but they're preying on your ignorance to not fully take the time to look into things and understand how words are used and how circumstances like what you see here prey on your emotions for you to think that they're truly seeking the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and that's far from the reality. Jeremiah chapter 32, 15 to 28 in the Septuagint, and it's chapter 25 in the Masoretic KJV. Thus says Yahuwah, Elohim of Israel, take the cup of this unmixed wine from mine hand, and thou shalt cause all the nations to drink, to whom I send thee. And they shall drink and vomit and be mad, because of the sword which I send among them. So I took the cup out of Yahuwah's hand, and caused the nations to whom Yahuwah sent me to drink, Jerusalem and the cities of Judah, and the kings of Judah and his princes, to make them a desert place, a desolation and a hissing. And Pharaoh king of Egypt, and his servants, and his nobles, and all his princes, and all the mingled people, and all the king of the Philistines, and Ascalon, and Gaza, and Akron, and the remnant of Azutos, and Idumea, and the land of Moab, and the children of Ammon, and the kings of Tyre, and the kings of Sidon, and the kings in the country beyond the sea, and Dedan, and Teman, and Ross, and everyone that is shaved around about the feast, and all the mingled people lodging in the wilderness, and all the kings of Elam, and all the kings of the Persians, and all the kings from the north, and far and the near, each one with his brother, and all the kingdoms which are on the face of the earth. And thou shalt say to them, thus says Yahuwah Almighty, drink ye, be ye drunken, and ye shall vomit, and shall fall, and shall in no wise rise, because of the sword which I send among you. And it shall come to pass, when they refuse to take the cup out of thine hand, to drink it, that thou shalt say, thus saith Yahuwah, ye shall surely drink. So as you can see, and well, not see, but the first thing we need to keep in mind about Jeremiah is that he is a prophet to the nations. And every one of these people groups, whether you think they still exist or not, the whole point is Yah sent out his word, and they have to take that cup, because when he is good and ready, he's going to use every one of these nations to bring about his purposes as it relates to his earth, his heaven, and everything that exists in it. So nobody really has a choice as to what is happening. And as you can see, the Persians, along with Egypt, is mentioned here. And in some instances, you can look at it figuratively, and in some instances, you can look at it literally. And this passage, you can look at it from both sides of the fence, because it's talking about the whole entire inhabited earth. And Jeremiah was told to take this cup and to give to each one of these entities. so that Yah's will would be executed through their actions. And we are seeing that coming to pass at this very moment. Okay, F around and find out. FAFO is taking a whole new meaning. The US was successful with the extraction of Nicolas Maduro and was on a high after that operation. FAFO was euphoric for the US leadership and their supporters. Now, a few moments later, with the Israel Ameri, I'm calling it the Israel Ameri Iran war of 2026, and we are in the 36th day of that situation. The aggressors have quickly learned that Iran is not a pushover like any other country you can put in that same circumstance. Iran was put, not Iran, Iraq was pushed over. Afghanistan, well, Afghanistan was a quagmire. Yeah, Vietnam was a formidable force to the US, but some other countries were pushed over, like Panama, the whole Caribbean, whole Latin America. They were really pushed by the US. But Iran is showing that they are not a pushover compared to many of these other countries. And good planning leads to good success. The opening hours of the conflict saw the decapitation of senior leaders of Iran, including Ayatollah Khamenei and close relatives. The Iranian girls' school getting bombed and other infrastructure was also targeted. Plus, the sinking of an unarmed Iranian warship that was invited to India for naval games and ceremonies. Keep in mind that war was not declared by any of the adversaries in this conflict, and that is for good reason. Based on international law, you should declare your intentions, but that was not done for many legal reasons. But that's not going to work. And to be quite honest, this may not end up in the Hague or anything like that, but this is going to end up somewhere else to be prosecuted for justice. In retaliation, the Iranian armed forces struck U.S. military bases and infrastructure in the region. It also struck Arab states' critical infrastructure and also Israeli infrastructure with a relentless bombing campaign that is still ongoing. Additionally, the Iranians have closed the Strait of Hormuz, and that was very brilliant, to commercial shipping. The economic impact is already being felt globally and soon on the horizon by Western societies. FAFO is really hitting hard. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. Some ships are getting through if they pay the passage tax that Iran state that any country wanting free passage through the strait have to pay. So there are goods moving through, but if you don't pay and they're asking for that payment in yuan, and which is very strategic. Currently, any transaction that is done globally has to go through the SWIFT system for payment, and it has to be done in US dollars. And every transaction, the US government gets a cut of that commerce that took place, that exchange of currency. Well, not exchange of currency, but payment of currency in US denominations. With the Strait of Hormuz being closed and Iran demanding that any country wanting to traverse the strait pay in Chinese yuan, means that America is being stifled from getting a cut of every transaction for oil that flows through that region. The Iranians are really not really, they are bankrupting the American system. And if you do not have money, you cannot build a society and you cannot fight wars. So they're trying to well, not trying, they have closed off that money spigot that allows the US to fight and to build and to keep fighting. And that was strategic on their part. and closing the Strait of Hormuz, they know how that would have impact. They were very much aware of how closing the strait would have impacted the global economy. Abbas Arakchi, the Iranian foreign minister, was interviewed by a mainstream American press outlet and was asked what he thought of the US invading Iran with ground troops, and his answer was very surreal. So, this is an excerpt from his response. So, quote, reporter, are you afraid of a US invasion of your country? Arakchi, no, we are waiting for them. Reporter, you are waiting for the US military to invade with ground troops? Arakchi, yes, because we are confident that we can confront them and that it would be a big disaster for them. FAFO is cool, calm, and collective from the Iranian foreign minister. So that's how Effarong and Fine really looks. Calm, cool, and no fear at all with anywhere from within this man. And he has become an inspiration to many people. In several press briefings by President Trump, his response to questions about some of the questionable actions have been palter, leading many observers to question his facts. It has been reported that Trump have requested ceasefire talks with Iran, with all requests being refused. Even to recently, as a 2 days ago, he asked for a 48-hour ceasefire, and the Iranians said no. Come fight. Let's finish this. Also, his recent address to U.S. citizens, and this was on April 2nd, made no coherent sense. No new insights were provided, and it was more of window dressing and probably an April Fool's ramble. I tried listening to that address to the US people. I listened for 2 minutes and checked out. It was not the easiest thing to hear. Not that it was just difficult to listen to him. And most people who commented was saying the same thing. It was very difficult to listen to him, but nothing new was provided in that address to the US people. The debate about the legality of the Israel-Iran war is far from over, but it seems that President Trump's statements may be a precursor to an incompetent plea before a court of law, and that's if it ever gets to that point. Iran did not start this war, neither are the accusations against the regime is true, such as, and these are some of the allegations leveled by Trump and all the sanctioned persons who have been making statement. So they beheaded babies, not true. They were responsible for the bombing of the girls' school because Trump said that the Iranians bombed the girls' school, not true. They killed 35,000 protesters in the last civil unrest, and that number went up to 45,000. And if that's let's see if that was true. If you go back to the Bosnia conflict with Slobodan Milosevic, they provided evidence showing that some of the genocide that took place in the Bosnian War that was provided, that was put out there. They have not put out any evidence showing that 35,000 protesters or 45,000 protesters, because the number keeps shifting, were killed by the Iranian regime. That's not true. And it's unfortunate that people are going to believe everything that comes out of this, the lying prophets of the West. Every other unfactual statement, claim, just like the lead up of every other conflict. So many things were said. They are not true. You can go verify this very easily. But as long as you have people ignorant, they are not going to take the time out to look into these things to see if there's any validity to it. Everyone in Trump's cabinet and support role, including military actors, are all culpable. And we will get to maybe get to some of that as we advance further, as a lot of things have since changed from that time. The US and Israel have FAFO'd. Now, the citizens of Israel and the Arab states are in distress with the Iranians. Unfortunately, successive power leadership and an ignorant electorate have led to this moment. And the architects of this crisis have been missing in action. Um, it's not certain if Netanyahu is dead or alive. Um, the Iranians said that they took him out along with other leaders of the military and political establishment in Israel, but nobody knows for certain. Unlike the US president that have been posting to social media and showing up at public events, the same cannot be said about the Israeli prime minister. Yes, the state of Israel is being bombarded with Iranian missiles, and it is unsafe to move about. If he has met his demise, it will be a psychological blow to the people and the entire war campaign. FAFO have been a true promise from Iran. Meanwhile, the leadership of Iran can be seen in public with citizens besides them as bombs fall from the sky. I'm sure he is patiently waiting for boots on the ground in Iran from any kind of Western ground forces. And that's Abbas Saeed Arakchi, again, can be seen in the Iranian public walking around with the full support of the Iranian people. And also Pezeshkian as well, the president of Iran. But so far, Arakchi has been really the face that everyone has been seeing as the foreign minister and the one who is showing calmness in the face of chaos and conflict. I won't be too surprised if he ends up the president one day eventually of Iran, given his role currently in the foreign minister role, and that's if they don't get to him to assassinate him. So what's next? Time to get your house in order. Proclaim these things among the Gentiles. Declare war. Arouse the warriors. Draw near and go up, all ye men of war. Beat your plowshares into swords and your sickles into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Gather yourselves together and go in, all ye nations round about, and gather yourselves together. Let the timid become a warrior. Let them be aroused. Let all the nations go up to the valley of Jehoshaphat. For there will I sit to judge all the Gentiles round about. Bring forth the sickles, for the vintage is come. Go in, tread the grapes, for the press is full. Cause the vats to overflow, for their wickedness is multiplied. Joel chapter 3, verse 9 to 13. And this passage here encapsulates where things are heading. Things are not going to de-escalate, they're going to escalate even more. And Yah is telling everyone to get ready for war because you're going to have to fight. And as I read from Jeremiah, talks about that cup going out to all the nations. It's going out, and there's no stopping it as it goes out. The leadership of the United States of America had a great opportunity to establish a righteous nation, given the roots of its history. Unfortunately, they have done everyone dirty and left a trail of destruction behind her. No U.S. leader is innocent. With the Strait of Hormuz still closed, many of the poorer countries are the first to feel the consequence. Iran has signaled that transit in the strait without their permission would be sunk. So any ship going through that strait would be sunk. If the closure is sustained, it will break the U.S. economy. America is trillions in debt. This war will break them, and it's already breaking them, as they have suffered a lot of losses within the early campaign, taking out the radar and surveillance system around the Gulf, hitting a lot of their bases, destroying a lot of their equipment, even up to 48 hours ago with the so-called rescue of the Dong pilot in Iran. $100 million worth of damage just for the rescue of one person. That's pretty spectacular. This conflict is not going to de-escalate. Hence, getting your house in order. Yahuwah has set the nations in disarray, and conditions are going to get even more dire. With war intensifying, it leaves room for the vacuum of poor leadership to be filled with the likes of Lucifer of Isaiah 14. It is the opinion that someone is eventually going to step up and try to take this whole situation under control. The first four verses gives a clear indication of the status of the house of Jacob. So Jacob is not going to be around when Lucifer, or they'll be on their way out when Lucifer takes control of the entire situation. And Yahuwah will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel, and they shall rest on their land, and the stranger shall be added to them, yea, shall be added to the house of Jacob, and the Gentiles shall take them and bring them into their place, and they shall inherit them, and they shall be multiplied upon their land for servants and handmaidens. And they that took them captive shall become captive to them, and they that had lordship over them shall be under their rule. And it shall come to pass in that day that Yahuwah shall give thee rest from thy sorrows and vexation, and from the hard servitude wherein thou didst serve them. And thou shalt take up this lamentation against the king of Babylon. How has the executioner ceased, and the taskmaster ceased? So something is going to come and present a situation, well, peace that is not really true, but it's going to lead to things escalating even further. So even though this guy Lucifer comes and says, "Hey, I can make peace out of everything," there's not going to be any peace. It's just going to get worse from there on forward. But a lot of people are going to be taken in by the charms of this person who is going to be setting things out on a global level. So this is what is expected to come after in terms of leadership, because the current leadership is poor, it's in disarray, and this person is going to take things under their control and establish order. Talk of nuclear weapons being introduced if Iran cannot be subdued is floating around. That's a red line no one should cross, but it's likely possible. The state of Israel may launch a nuke if their existence is threatened, and it's being threatened. Security officials have disabled many surveillance cameras across Israel as the potential for them being used to spy and show the current destruction is likely as the cyber war wages. A drowning man is desperate to hold on to life and will do anything to preserve it. So the nuclear bomb, also known as the Samson option, is on the table and may most likely be used. And there was reports that in the Dimona area in Israel, there were tremors. So it's believed that they may have tested some of their nuclear capability with the hopes of executing the Samson option if they cannot prevail in this conflict. When the economic stranglehold that Iran has on the Strait intensify, expect panic as people scramble to get resources. Prices of everyday commodities is going to spike. People are already stressed with current economic circumstances, and this conflict is going to make it even more difficult. Excuse. The US is warning about sleeper cells that can be activated to attack the mainland. That is a possibility, but no access to food is a problem that no government wants to deal with. And these are just some headlines that were captured a few weeks ago showing the situation from the Strait of Hormuz being closed and no fuel is going to some of these countries that depend on on the fuel to run their economies. And right now, here in Canada, the price of fuel is inching up to the $2 range slowly but surely. So it's going to impact the whole world, whether we like it or not. So, five, conclusion and final thoughts. America and Israel have miscalculated the strength and capabilities of Iran. No learning from previous engagements, they thought, not learning from previous engagements, they thought that Iran was going to be a pushover. And by Purim, and that was the expectation, they launched the conflict on the 28th of February, and a couple days later was supposed to be Purim. They thought by Purim the encounter would have been wrapped up to have a big celebration, just like the outcome in the scroll of Esther. So they thought they'd have pushed Iran over in a blitzkrieg sort of situation, get the people to revolt and overthrow the government, and then they would have a big Purim celebration in Israel and everywhere else. And that would have been the talking, and that would have been, well, it would have taken them from that Maduro situation, which was successful, into this and then a big party. And that was not the case. They have been backed into a corner that is difficult to emerge from. And with a looming economic crash, the West may have to brace for unrest on the home front. The US cannot fight a foreign war and have domestic issues to manage. This was discussed in the first installment of the presentation in the first, unlike any other. Honestly, the Persian factor in unlike any other was not considered. And it should have been considered, but at the time, the Ukraine conflict and October 7th situation in Israel took center stage. And nobody, well, maybe some analysts, yes, some analysts did predict the Iran situation, but it was not in consideration. But this conflict is going to impact everyone. Isaiah 13:17-19. Behold, I will stir up against you the Medes. Before I read this, the whole point of all these presentations is to show how the scripture, well, how not how the scripture, but how everything that is taking place aligns with the scripture. The scripture is here to give those who submit to the authority of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is here to be the guide, even though it's in riddles and locked to those who don't seek the truth. The information is there once you understand it. Once you understand the riddles, you'll be able to decipher what it's saying. And here we have, behold, I will stir up against you the Medes, who do not regard silver, neither have they need for gold. The Iranians have been offered many things, and they are considered to be the ancient Medes and Persian Empire that is mentioned multiple times within the scripture. And they don't desire it. They have no need for it. They don't want it. They don't even want to negotiate with them with the US. And no amount of gold and silver they present these people as they're going to budge from their position because they want to be left alone. They shall break the bows of the young men, and they shall have no mercy on your children, nor shall their eyes spare thy children. And Babylon, which is called glorious by the king of the Chaldeans, shall be as when Elohim overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. And the US is also considered to be Babylon as well, figuratively. A conversation for another time. Jeremiah 28 in the Septuagint and 51 in the KJV. Prepare the arrows, fill the quivers. Yahuwah has stirred up the spirit of the king of the Medes, for his wrath is against Babylon, to destroy it utterly. For it is Yahuwah's vengeance, it is the vengeance of his people. Not so is Jacob's portion, For he that formed all things, he is his inheritance. Yahuwah is his name. Thou scatterest for me the weapons of war, and I will scatter the nations by thee, and will destroy kings by means of thee. And by thee I will scatter the horse and his rider, and by thee I will scatter chariots and them that ride in them, and by thee I will scatter youth and maid, and by thee I will scatter man and woman, and by thee I will scatter the shepherd and his flock, and by thee I will scatter the husbandman and his husbandry, and by thee I will scatter leaders and captains, and I will recompense to Babylon and to all the Chaldeans that dwell there all their mischiefs which they have done to Zion before your eyes, saith Yahuwah. And Zion is the house of Jacob. Behold, I am against thee, the ruined mountains that destroys the whole world. Mountains is strength. And I will stretch out my hand upon thee, and will roll thee down upon the rocks, and will make thee as a burnt mountain. And they shall not take from thee a stone for a corner, nor a stone for a foundation. For thou shalt be desolate forever, saith Yahuwah. Lift up a standard in the land, sound the trumpet among the nations. Consecrate the nations against her. Rise up kings against her by me. And that for the people of Achaz, and set against her engines of war. Bring up against her horses as a multitude of locusts. Bring up nations against her, even the king of the Medes and the whole earth, his rulers and all his captains. So what this passage of scripture is saying that the Medes are going to do Yah's bidding for him, and it's already happening. Hence the reason why I keep saying this is not going to de-escalate, it's going to escalate more. Hence, to be prepared for things to unfold. Make sure you have all the necessities, because once the supply chain is broken and once industry comes to a halt, the things that make life manageable is not going to be available. And everyone, that's why it mentioned these different categories of people, like the leaders, the captains, the husbandman, and his husbandry. These are all the entities and their station in life, how they earn is going to be impacted. That is what this is saying. And put yourself in a spot by submitting to the Most High Yah for him to guide you through this. So you have to prepare, you have to tap into Yah and ensure that you sort of insulate yourself from what is about to happen, because we can't get through this on our own. We really need that support from Yah. And this is why he has been saying to the house of Israel to repent. This is why it is important to understand the purposes of the feast, because it's telling a story that's going to repeat itself. And if you're not prepared, you're going to, well, if you fail to prepare to fail. So final thoughts. So what is taking place? For those in the know, Joe Kent, who is National Security Advisor in the Trump administration, resigned because of the situation with the Iran war. The Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, fired the Army Chief of Staff, General Randy George, along with some other senior Army officials. In the middle of a war, you fire senior generals. That's insane, but they did it. And also, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, was sacked. As we know, Pam Bondi was supposed to be the one responsible for releasing the Epstein files, and she never did. And the Epstein files have been playing heavily in this conflict as well, along with the Epstein class. Social unrest likely to escalate after the No Kings protests. America had a No Kings protest recently, another one, and it was well attended. And it's showing the uneasiness of the American people towards this war, and it could lead to more unrest taking place in America, and there's also a government shutdown which has impacted air travel and some security services in the US. Expect shortages to expand as supply chains get further disrupted, already happening. Iran is digging in their heels. They are not prepared to negotiate, and every time they were asked by the US to have some sort of ceasefire discussions, they have refused. And right now, all the backdoor channels are working overtime to see what sort of arrangement can be made. The conflict with well, it has expanded to include Hezbollah and the Houthis. At the time this was written, that the talk was it would happen, but no, it has happened. So the Houthis and Hezbollah has entered the conflict, and yes, they have been taking losses, more so Hezbollah, but Hezbollah has been really causing a lot of concern to Israel, as Hezbollah has been taking out a lot of their equipment and a lot of their personnel. So Hezbollah is doing a lot of work in the north of Israel from Lebanon. Um, we are still expecting a ground invasion. It is believed that the incursion to, in quotes, rescue that pilot from who was downed in Iran, that pilot who is still, well, they said he was rescued, but some people believe it was a ground invasion that went wrong as well. So they're having difficulty figuring out how to infiltrate Iran successfully with limited casualties. That's not a possibility. The state of Israel is still under constant missile attack, and there is a reverse exodus taking place through Jordan and Egypt, as the Ben Gurion airport has been damaged really badly. So the Rafah crossing in Egypt is seeing a lot of Israelis leaving, and also through Jordan as well. So some Israeli airlines have shifted their base of operations to Jordan to help with the movement of people out of Israel who has the means to do so. The Gulf states are powerless. America was their bodyguard, and America has been totally humiliated in the region. And as we know, a lot of American sea-based assets are staying a safe distance away. Um, Early in the conflict, the Iranians said that they fired at the aircraft carrier Gerald Ford. They said it was a lie, and eventually the president of the United States said that yes, it was attacked. We don't know if he was being coherent or not, but that aircraft carrier is out of commission for the next year, allegedly, and it has not returned to home port. It's currently in port in Croatia, because I believe if it was to return to the US, the extent of the damage would be seen, and it might be demoralizing to the American people. So America cannot protect the Gulf states, and one of the demands of Iran to the Gulf states is to kick the American powers out. The US is very vulnerable with the many losses. Um, America, based on all the military equipment they lost so far, naval as well as air, they are returning to their aircraft boneyard in the US to bring old planes back into service to replace some of their newer planes that has been destroyed by Iran in the conflict. And the thing to keep in mind is, if America continued to take external losses, they would have to make a serious pivot to focus on home defense, because they would be left very vulnerable. And Iran has already given the formula of how to defeat the US just by using drone technology and good and other good intelligence as well. The state of Israel is vulnerable. We see that they're taking hit after hit after hit, and eventually, well, there is some footage coming out showing that their missile defense system is not working to stop the supersonic missiles and the drones that Iran has been launching. So they are vulnerable, and it's left to be seen how long they can last as 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 a state. Russia and China are two of the benefactors in this, and Russia and China, given the conflicts that they are facing, Russia with Ukraine and then China with Taiwan, once America is broken, Zelensky in Ukraine would have no choice but to make peace with Russia, and China may not even have to shoot a bullet to take back Taiwan. And it's they are going to be the big winners in this conflict because of the foolish errand America took in trying to take out Iran. Yahuwah is setting up the regathering of the house of Jacob, and that's something that's taking place. And even though there is war, there's also natural events such as earthquakes, volcanoes. In Germany, there's a mountain that's splitting between Germany and Austria. There's so many other things going on, but unfortunately, the war. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, the war in the Middle East is taking up most of the airtime. But there are other things taking place that is just as important and is leading up to Yah regathering the household of Jacob back to where he needs for them to be. So this is where things are heading to, where current circumstances are concerned. It may seem that the words from the US officials are far from reality. Yahuwah may have a lying spirit advising them and not listening to wise counsel from reasonable men, what reasonable men are providing. So this is from 3 Kings 22 to 18 in the Septuagint and 1 Kings 22 in the KJV. And the king of Israel said to Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, did I not say to thee that this man does not prophesy good for me? For he speaks nothing but evil. And Micaiah said, not so. It, it is not I. Hear the words of Yahuwah. It is not so. I saw the Elohim of Israel sitting on his throne, and all the host of heaven stood around him on his right and on his left. And Yahuwah said, who will deceive Ahab, king of Israel, that he may go up and fall in Ramat Gilead? And one spoke one way, and another way. And there came forth a spirit and stood before Yahuwah and said, I will deceive him. And Yahuwah said to him, whereby? And he said, I will go forth, and I will be a false spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, thou shalt deceive him, yea, and shalt prevail. Go forth and do so. And now behold, Yahuwah has put a false spirit in the mouth of all these thy prophets, and Yahuwah has spoken evil against thee. And it is the view that this is what is happening to the entire leadership of the United States. A lying spirit is in the mouths of all the prophets. And a prophet is not someone who foretells the future, a prophet is just a spokesperson. Excuse. And this is why America and the West is having problems in this current conflict, because Yah is orchestrating everything to restore the house of Jacob. And these men and those in position of leadership had an opportunity to show what righteousness was, and they never did. And hence all the trials and tribulations that the world has seen from generation to generation. So here we have a statement from Donald Trump recently put out on his Truth Social. And he said Tuesday, so today is the 5th, so that's by the 7th of April. Tuesday will be Powered Plant Day and Bridge Day all wrapped up in one in Iran. There will be nothing. Okay, I should say it in Trump voice, but I'm not good at doing that. But what is interesting is that his expletive that he says, open the fucking street. As much as we want to think our leaders have piety, you can see the frustration bleeding out in his post on his social media platform. So open the fucking street, you crazy bastards. You'll be living in hell. Just watch. And then he praises Allah, President Donald J. Trump. And to be honest, I'm not even sure if it's him that wrote this or someone else wrote it in his pen. But this is just to show the state of affairs of American leadership. And I hope the people of America take note and understand what is happening. Because if they don't put their house in order, well, this can America be saved? Yes and no. The yes part is if the head of the country and everybody else, like in the book of Jonah, repents, yeah, I might turn it away, but we know that ain't going to happen. And again, this is going to escalate to the point where everyone is going to have to squabble up, as Kendrick Lamar says. So let the peace of Yah be with you. Thank you for tuning in. And if you have any questions, you can send me an email to that email address, and you can go to the website to access the presentation slides and other resources from this presentation. Thank you very much for tuning in. And if there's any other developments, there might be another installment on on this topic unlike any other. Take care till the next presentation.